love to just kind of meditate on a proverb, and some of these, what we might call pithy sayings, these proverbs that seem to capsulize and succinctly state a principle or a thought are a good thing to kind of just think on, dwell on, meditate on, and such is the case here in Proverbs chapter 14. I want to take a few moments this afternoon to think on it. Verse number 4, Proverbs 14, verse 4. The Bible says, "Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox." The rigors of life can be challenging. If I or you saw the schedule of the person next to you, you might be rather amazed that they're even alive. Our schedules are busy, aren't they? Many of you get up early in the morning and try to spend a little time with the Lord, off to work, getting the kids ready for school, working all day, perhaps at a job or at home, trying to manage life, paying bills, raising kids, yard work, errands, running here and there. On top of that, of course, you have your obligations to the Lord. We feel a strong sense to be involved in our church and the ministries of it. And it seems like the more that we volunteer for, the more opportunities come. And we get busy. And there are a lot of things that can occupy our life. On top of that, we certainly need time for our families and time for some social life and recreation and hobbies and things that interest us and bring that balance to our life. Life schedule is full. You layer on top of that some of the burdens of life. Life has its burdens. There are physical challenges. There are financial challenges. There are things with our families and things with our extended families and relationships and obligations. Layered on top of that is just stress as we try to make the right choices for our lives, for our families, for financial security and stabilization. We try to figure out how we're going to make it financially or how we're going to retire or all of these different things that come into our life. The culture, the politics, the religious landscape only add to some of the pressure that we feel. And going through life today can be difficult, and many people have a hard time coping. Some people just decide to take their life, end their life. Suicides, at least down in the States, are at an all-time high. People just ending their life because of frustration and stress and just anxieties and fears and all these things that are associated with life. And as a Christian, we're not completely exempt from that. And many times we find ourselves just kind of wanting to withdraw. We just kind of want to take a step back and say, well, maybe I'm overcommitted. Maybe this thing about family and this thing about church and these things that I kind of was raised to think are important, maybe they're not so important. Maybe I just need to kind of ease back on some of my commitments. It'd be a lot easier to be uncommitted. It'd be a lot easier without some of the risk. I could enjoy life a little bit more. I could have a little bit more fun and not be so serious. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 4 shows us the cause and effect of a commitment or the lack thereof. And I want us to think about the two choices and the two consequences of those choices as found here in Proverbs 14 and verse 4. The first choice is an empty barn. An empty barn, where no oxen are. An empty barn. You know, I grew up with cows. Growing up on a farm, and a dairy farm at that, we had a lot of cows. We had 50 milk cows that we milked every morning at 4 o'clock and every evening at 4 o'clock. Took 3 hours to milk them both times, so 6 hours a day were spent with cows, milking them. We had about 100 livestock, calves and steers and younger stock that we were raising as well. We had about 200 chickens. We had 30 hogs. We had 30 sheep. I personally owned 94 rabbits. We had a horse. We had a dog. We had 25 cats. Yeah. But as a result of having 25 cats, we had no mice. Every building on our farm, except for our house and the machine shed, had animals in it. Even buildings that were one time used for something else now were housed to some animals. We had a little building we called the smokehouse. It wasn't where we went to smoke, but it was the place where they used to smoke the meat. It was the place where they used to, in the old days, hang the meat and smoke it and preserve it in that way. And it was called the smokehouse, but it wasn't a smokehouse when I was growing up. That's where the sheep went at night and protected from the wolves and dogs and so on. Every building, it seemed like, on that farm had animals in it. And those animals required a lot of our schedule. 3:45 in the morning, we were up. At 4 a.m., milking. Every one of those cows had to be milked, and it took 3 hours to milk those cows from 4 o'clock until 7 o'clock. And I would get up as a little boy with my dad and go out to that barn, and he would start milking, and usually my mom would come out as well. After a few household chores, she would come out and help my dad, and then I would be relegated to feeding all those cows. And we had alfalfa that we baled up into 80-pound bales, and the upper part of the barn was filled with about 3,000 bales of hay. And we had silos that contained the silage or fodder. You'd take hay or corn or oats, and you'd chop it up and blow it into these silos, and it would pack down and ferment. Cows enjoy getting drunk. They love silage. And so you'd have to climb up the top of that silo about 80 feet in the air, and you'd go in there with a pitchfork, and you'd take it one pitchfork at a time and throw it down a chute, enough for all those cows to eat. Every cow would eat one wheelbarrow full of silage, both morning and evening. And so you had to pitch all that down the chute of the silo, and then you'd climb down the silo and take that same pitchfork and pick it up one pitchfork at a time and put it into the wheelbarrow, and then you'd fill that wheelbarrow and roll it down the manger and dump it in front of the cows, and all 50 of those cows had to have one wheelbarrow full of silage. And then after that, you had to feed the livestock. The young stock had to take the bales of hay and carry them, 80 pounds of hay, and take it to those mangers for those younger cattle. In the spring and summer, we would chop some hay for them to eat during the day. I'd hook up a tractor at the crack of dawn and a green chopper and a bunk wagon and go out and chop a load of hay. This was all before school. And after the cows were milked, then we had to clean the barn. Had to sweep out the manger and sweep out the stalls and clean out the gutters. And Saturdays were devoted to cleaning the hog pen or cleaning the chicken coop or cleaning the rabbit pens. And we would clean. And then, of course, there was field work, the plowing and the working of the fields, and then the harvesting, the baling of hay and the gathering of the oats and the picking of the corn. And every night, 4 o'clock, all over again. And then I had to go to school. I don't know why. I was getting a pretty good education, but I had to go to school. My dad got to quit after 8th grade, but he didn't want to hear any of that from me. And so going to school and played 3 sports. Starting in 5th grade, I was playing 3 different sports. And, of course, church, every time the doors were open, Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night, and youth activities and revival meetings and missionary conferences. And then when I was 13 years old, my dad bought a second farm right next to ours. So we tore down the fences and we plowed those fields even bigger. And now we had 2 barns to clean and more animals and more field work. There were many times as a youngster I wished for a clean barn. I wished for an empty barn. I just thought, if we didn't have all these animals, living on a farm would be great. You know, I had my own football field. I had my own basketball court up in the hayloft in the barn. I mean, I had a lot of things there that I could do and play and enjoy. We lived down the Rock River. I could go down there and go fishing or whatever I wanted to do. And there were a lot of advantages to living out there in the country. But boy, those animals. And I'd often get frustrated. I'd get tired of feeding them. I'd get tired of milking them. I'd get tired of cleaning their pens. One morning, I remember being frustrated with this one particular cow. When I'd push that wheelbarrow down in front of them in the manger, those cows, they're hungry. They have 4 stomachs, and so they eat a lot. And they'd be hungry. I'd bring them in the barn for milking. They'd want to eat right now, you know. And it took a while to feed all those cows. And so you'd wheel that wheelbarrow down through the manger, and I'd always start at the far end, you know, start with those cows way down there, and I'd wheel it down that manger. Well, all the cows that were, you know, waiting, they're impatient. And this one cow, man, she could stretch her neck out farther than the others, and she'd always hit that wheelbarrow and knock it over. Man, I got frustrated with that cow. And one morning, I took a pitchfork, and I poked her right in the nose. I mean, blood is spurting all over that whitewashed wall. Man, I never worked so fast and so hard trying to clean that up before my dad got out there. But I got frustrated with those cows, and I wished oftentimes for an empty barn. Why? Because an empty barn leads to easy burdens. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. An empty barn has the consequence of an easy burden. My dad and my uncle were brothers. I don't think that's rocket science for anybody here, but my dad and my uncle were brothers. My mom and my aunt were sisters. Brothers married sisters. So in my family, I had double cousins because my dad and his brother married my mom and her sister. So my aunt and uncle, in that particular relationship, we were pretty close to them. I mean, we were related to them on both sides, you could say. And so there was always a happy time when we'd get around them. They were very much alike. And so we, as cousins, they had 2 boys, and Neil and Chuck was closer to my age. And man, I envied Chuck. They lived in town. Their dad, my uncle, he worked for the gas and electric company. He went to work at 8 o'clock and got a lunch break at noon and came home at 5. And they didn't have any chores. I mean, take the garbage out, you know. Mow the grass, shovel the sidewalk. You know, that was about the extent of what they had to do. My cousin Chuck was a baseball player and a really good one. He got drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies, and my uncle went to every one of his games. Every time my cousin Chuck pitched in a game, every time he played a baseball game, my uncle was there. My dad got to come to 1 football game in my life. I started playing in 5th grade, played all the way through college. My dad got to see the second half of 1 game in high school. It was senior night, my senior year, and he got the milking done and got there at halftime. And by the way, I was never bitter about that. I was never angry about that. That was just the way it was. It wasn't that my dad didn't like me or wasn't supporting me. In fact, he urged me to play sports, and he always wanted to hear about the game, and he'd listen to it on the radio, and he'd have a comment when I got home, hey, that was great, you guys played well, or, you know, he would say, well, it was a tough loss, but you'll get them next time, and he was very encouraging about my sports, but he never got to come and watch me play, and I remember as a kid thinking, man, I wish my dad could be here. I wish my dad could see me play. I wish my dad never saw a basketball game I played in. He never saw a track meet I ran in. My dad was busy on that farm. And I remember thinking, man, if we had an empty barn, we'd have some easy burdens. You know, some of you in this room are coveting a clean crib. This would be so much easier if I wasn't so committed to church. Maybe if we had never joined, but maybe if we just kind of attended, they wouldn't expect so much. You know, they wouldn't expect me to be at every service. Or maybe if I hadn't become a deacon, this would be a lot easier. If I hadn't volunteered to teach that class, or if I wasn't an usher, or if I didn't work in the nursery, this would be so much easier. You can sell the cows and have a shiny crib. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which called his servants and delivered unto them his goods, and straightway took his journey. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1. And after a long time he returned and reckoned with them. And he that had received the 5 talents came bringing other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he that received the 2 talents came, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he that received the 1 talent came, saying, Lord, I knew that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, here thou hast that is thine. And his Lord said to him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I was an hard man, reaping where I had not sown, and gathering where I had not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore have taken my money, and given it unto the exchangers, that at my coming I might have received mine own with usury. Take the talent from him, give it unto him that hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, but he that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, the one fella, he had a clean crib. He had an easy life. But in the end, he had made the wrong choice. You see, we have a choice. We can take what God has given us in our time, in our talents, our opportunities, and we can trade and we can work and we can invest our life in these things, or we can hide, we can bury, we can ignore. We can choose to have empty barns. We can choose to just do the minimum as a Christian. You know, I'm saved, that's enough. I'm not going to commit my life to God. I'm not going to go all in. I'm going to stay here while everybody else goes forward. I'm just going to be here and not do quite as much. That's our choice. And the result will be easy burdens. An empty barn leads to easy burdens. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. Or we can choose endless busyness. Verse 4, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. You know, if you have a lot of cows, they're going to make a lot of mess. Not once, but over and over and over and over and over. We had to clean that barn every day. Every day we'd milk those cows and turn them back out into the pasture, out into the barnyard for the day, and we'd go to work cleaning that barn. And I had to sweep those mangers out. After I'd fed those cows and they had eaten, I had to go there with a broom and sweep out all that was left. Sometimes their saliva and that silage would kind of mat itself down, and you had to take a scraper and scrape that all clean. See, we were grade A milk farmers. That milk that you drink in the store, it comes from some farmers that have a sanitized system, and they don't. There's no contamination in that milk, and that milk house has to be spotless, and things have to be clean. And I'd scrape those mangers down and sweep them out. You couldn't find a speck of straw anywhere. And you had to clean the stalls and sweep those out. And then we'd back the manure spreader down through the center of the barn. And we'd take a shovel and we'd have to shovel that manure into that manure spreader and clean up after those cows. And we'd get that all swept out. And once the barn was clean, then we'd take some white lime and we'd throw it on that barn. And I'm telling you, when you walked in that barn after we got done, it smelled good. It was clean. It was sanitized. But then about 3:45 in the evening, we'd open that barn door, and those cows would come back in to eat again, milk again. And those cows, they'd walk through that door into that beautiful, clean barn. And I mean, a couple of those cows, they'd take about 2 steps in, their tail would go up, and the barn was dirty again. Much increase is by the strength of the ox. Greatness, success, is obtained through repetitive, mundane tasks. Let me say that again. Greatness, success, however, whatever that looks like to you, whatever you picture as success in life or with your family or in this ministry, whatever you think of as success or greatness, it is obtained through repetitive, mundane tasks. We like to think of success as that big day, or we like to think of success as, when our kids graduate from high school, or we like to think of success as perhaps a financial goal is achieved, but success is obtained through everyday, repetitive, mundane tasks. You know what makes a great mom? You know what makes a mom successful when it's all said and done? Changing diapers, fixing lunches, washing clothes, making beds, driving kids to school, paying bills, working a job, attending events, over and over and over and over and over and over and over. That's what makes a great mom. You know what makes a great pastor? Knocking on doors, making hospital visits, visiting the shut-ins, 3 sermons a week, cleaning the building, printing the bulletin, practicing with the choir, taking the offering, paying the bills, discipleship, hospitality, counseling, deacons meetings, special events, over and over and over and over and over and over. Success is obtained through repetitive, mundane tasks. But that endless busyness leads to expected blessings. Did you notice it there? Much increase is by the strength of that ox. Yeah, you can get rid of the ox. You can sell the cow and have a shiny crib. You can take people into your barn and say, man, look at this barn. Isn't this a beauty? Man, it's clean. It smells good. Well, where are the cows? Don't have any. Sold them. Got a clean barn. Got a clean crib. But there's no increase. Or you can choose that endless busyness of cleaning that barn and maintaining those animals, and with it comes some expected blessings. I remember one day I was in the milk house. I was probably about 8 or 9. And by this time I was well entrenched in the schedule of farming. Now I remember I was in that milk house cleaning away there, and I noticed something. There was a little shelf in that milk house, and I noticed there was an envelope on it, and I had never seen anything on that shelf before, and I was curious about that, and I was tall enough to reach up there. Maybe I hadn't been tall enough to see it before, but I reached up and I took that envelope. And it was open. It wasn't pasted shut. It wasn't licked shut. It was kind of folded in, and I thought, hey, I wonder what this is. I opened it up, and I pulled out a check. It was the milk check. And I looked at that milk check. It was for just over $500. Whoa. Man, I carefully put that back in the envelope, put that thing back up on that shelf. $500. The milk check. For a month of selling that milk, we got $500. You say, Brother Goetsch, that wasn't very much. Listen, my mom spent $10 a week on groceries. This was a different era, my friend. My mom spent $10 a week on groceries. You can't feed that kid one meal for $10 now. I mean, it's ridiculous. $500, that to me was like $1 million. I thought, wow. All that work, but we have $500. I told you I had 94 rabbits. My dad let me raise these rabbits. And my allowance was 25 cents a week. I didn't get paid for working on that farm. I didn't get paid to get up at 3:45 in the morning and milk cows for 3 hours and feed cattle and clean hog pens. I didn't get paid for that. I got an allowance, 25 cents a week. So, I was living in depression. I needed some cash. So when I was a young kid, my dad said, well, you could take this area here in this shed, back of this shed, you could make some rabbit pens and you could get a rabbit or two. And rabbits multiply pretty quickly, he told me. And I wasn't into much of that at that point, but I soon discovered that rabbits have a very short gestation period, 30 days. Rabbits can have babies every 30 days. So if you want lots of something, rabbits is a good idea. So I bought a couple of rabbits. And I started raising rabbits. And I mean, they multiplied quickly. I had one old rabbit. She was mean. I mean, that rabbit, when you got in her cage, she would attack you. She was a huge rabbit. But I'll tell you, you say, why did you keep her? One time she had 13 babies. And no runts. They were all healthy. And I wanted those babies. I put up with that rabbit because she was a producer. And I'd raise those rabbits up to 3 pounds. I'd get them up to 3 pounds, and my dad told me about a place in town where I could take those rabbits and sell them. And I got 16 cents a pound. So for one rabbit, a 3-pound rabbit, I got 48 cents. I'm telling you, that doubled my allowance. One little rabbit. And you know what? I didn't enjoy those rabbits. In fact, I hated cleaning those pens. I hated feeding those things. You had to grow lettuce and carrots and all this stuff that they would eat, and you had to feed them, you had to water them. They were constantly tipping over their water troughs, and I mean, they were a mess. They were always getting out of their pens, always had to repair their cages. They were a mess, but you know what? I'd go to school sometimes with like $8 in my pocket. I mean, I was a big man on campus. I mean, lunch milk in those days, little cartons of chocolate milk, 2 cents, 2 pennies. I'd have about $8 in my pocket, I'm like the millionaire on campus. I got Rabbits Incorporated, Should have got a sign, John Goetsch, Rabbits, LTD or something, Blessings because of endless burdens. And the Bible says the labor of the righteous tendeth to life. In all labor there's profit. He that gathereth by labor shall increase. Now, I'm not speaking about a good work ethic this afternoon because the world has that. Right? I mean, there are people that are working this weekend. Why? Because they're motivated by that blessing of making more money or making a greater business or investing this into something that will produce a greater result. And people in the world have a work ethic, but they're doing it, as Paul said, for a corruptible crown. All that's staying here when they leave. But we labor for an incorruptible that fadeth not away. And so all I want to communicate this afternoon is this: don't run from your responsibilities. Dad, Mom, I know raising kids is not easy. And sometimes we just think, my wife and I used to look at each other sometimes and say, why did we have kids again? And we said it jokingly, but there was some thought to, whatever got us into this business? These kids are hard. It's not easy. We're killing ourselves trying to keep up, going to this activity and this ball game and going to this recital and this thing and that thing. And you know what? It's easy just to step back and say, I'm never getting married. I'm never going to have kids. And sometimes we think of our church ministries, we think, why did I ever get involved? I mean, it's just busy. And the more I do, the more pastor thinks I should be able to do. And we want to run from those responsibilities, but don't run from responsibility. Don't despise your duties. Don't get careless in your commitment. Don't get slothful in your serving. Look, you can sell your ox and spare your obligations, or you can keep your ox and kindle your opportunities. And I want to just encourage you. Listen, some of you are carrying some burdens, you're carrying some weights, you're carrying some life stress. And the world's attitude about that stuff is, I'm just going to back away. I see it in college students every day of my life. They think, I'm not going to get married yet. I'm not going to go in ministry right away when I graduate. I'm just going to kind of kick back. I don't want that risk. I don't want that responsibility. And listen, you're going to miss an opportunity. Thank God today for a barn full of cows. If your schedule's busy, if you're thinking right now, I wish you'd hurry up and get done because I got to go home and get the laundry done. Thank God for it. Because you have the blessing of a family. And one day those kids are going to rise up and call you blessed. Because you're faithful to those responsibilities. Some of you are thinking, man, I don't know if I can go another week at my job. I don't know if I can do my ministry much longer. I'm just wearing out. I'm just burning out. I'm just getting tired. I'm getting weary. Listen, thank God for a barn full of cows. The milk check's coming. There's a day, I look forward to that day when my dad would say, load up those rabbits. We're going to town. Man, that made that 3:45 in the morning worth it. That made those Saturdays cleaning pens worth it. Because I was going to come back with some money in my pocket. You know what? We're not doing it for a few dollars in our pocket. We're not doing it for the temporal, for the corruptible. We're doing it for the incorruptible. So keep your cows. And thank God for them. Thank God for your burdens. Thank God for the stress. Thank God for the responsibilities that you have in your life, in your family, in your church ministries. Thank God for it. And as you stay faithful in those mundane day after day after day tasks, one day you're going to turn around and you're going to look at your kids and you're going to look at your ministry and you're going to say, wow, look what God did. Thank God I kept the cows. Yeah, the house wasn't always clean as I wanted it to be. And we didn't always have the money we needed to have to do this or that. And man, I didn't get to watch as many ball games because I was always at church, it seemed like. But you know what? You're going to look back and look at that milk check and go, wow. Wow. Look at the blessing of God that will be for all of eternity. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. But much increase is by the strength of the ox.